Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Rad Gaming Tech.com video, we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully, you're having an amazing day. We have lots of stuff to get through in this video. I have to say that I wasn't actually planning on recording this one today. I was mostly focused on recording out a couple of other videos, but since lots of tech news actually popped up in the space of just a few hours, it seems, I figured, well, I've got the camera set up anyway, as I'm recording a video detailing how the next generation console's SSD works and all this other stuff, so I thought, well, why not? I haven't recorded a news video on camera in a while. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, first thing I'd like to discuss is the RX 6900. Nice. I actually saw these slides floating around yesterday, but Amy covered the news yesterday, but I was kind of like, I don't really believe that they're genuine. But given so many outlets have thrown their couple of pennies into this, I figure I might as well detail it. So, as we are most likely aware by now, the second generation of RDNA will be launched, hopefully, at least if there's no delay, by the end of the year. And naturally, it will be competing against Nvidia's Ampere architecture, aka RTX 30. Ampere is shaping up to be really good, but then so is RDNA. In fact, I'm hearing incredibly good things about the second generation of RDNA, not just in terms of raw performance, but also ray tracing is allegedly pretty damn good too. Anyway, we know some things for certain, like AMD have confirmed that it has a 50% improvement per watt over RDNA 1, which is obviously a really good thing. AMD have also confirmed hardware-based ray tracing, they've confirmed variable rate shading support, yada yada yada, which is all to say that the next generation cards are ultimately gonna kick butt. You can argue that the first generation of RDNA really should have had certain features, like, for example, variable rate shading, but, well, it isn't to be. But getting back to the rumours for today, the RX 6900 has had a series of slides which have supposedly leaked online. And I wanted to just talk about these slides just briefly. Adored TV has actually done a really good job of breaking down why these slides are almost certainly fake, so I'll link his website in the description of the video, as there's quite a lot of in-depth information that he's put out to kind of spot why these slides are fake. There are some things to take into consideration, like AMD typically use more cautious language when, for example, detailing the clock frequencies, especially the up-to boost frequencies of the GPU, and there's no such language here. Instead, they just say 2200 megahertz for the clock speed, and I have to say that that immediately raised suspicion, because that's essentially the same speed here that they're stating that the PlayStation 5 can get to, and I'm very skeptical that the clock frequencies of both the PlayStation 5 and this upcoming GPU are going to be identical. Although one positive is that they are comparing these cards against the RTX 2080 Ti. If they compared them against the RTX 30 series, then obviously that would be complete and utter bunk, because they would not have access to this information. Another thing is that the card itself looks really safe. It's essentially a design that we've seen before, but with just a Vega 64 liquid cooler slapped on top of it, and it just doesn't look like something AMD would do, especially when AMD have gone on the record and said that they would be beefing up the the first-party designs of Radeon, and I don't think that this is what they meant. I don't think that they just simply meant that they would create some kind of weird-ass Vega 64 ripoff. It doesn't look like what I would expect the cards to end up being designed as. So all of that, combined with some really hinky things with the overall slides anyway, such as, well, them existing, to be totally honest. There's no way that we would have these slides at this point. These slides would probably not be constructed until maybe the last couple of weeks before launch. You can get spelling mistakes on slides which are even sent to reviewers. I've seen some kind of big mistakes myself, but ultimately this is because quite frequently the slides are put together almost the last minute, And at this point, I'm very hesitant to even imagine AMD have close to final production silicon. They're probably at best briefing board partners of what they can expect, that type of thing. That's what I've heard. They're briefing board partners soonish for the second generation of RDNA. But I don't think that they would be putting together slides at this point. So yeah, long story short, I'm 99% certain that all of these slides are fake.
Hey all, it's Paul from the future, and Paul from the future has an update concerning Vermeer, aka Ryzen 4000. AMD have confirmed that these CPUs will launch this year and furthermore be utilizing the 7nm process, or more specifically, a slightly tweaked and enhanced variant of 7nm. So this is basically completely and utterly nuking the rumours from DigiTimes, as well as a couple of other places, that AMD were considering launching Zen 3 next year. I had said that I was rather skeptical AMD would shift to 5nm at such a late point in the game. After all, consider the fact that their own roadmaps had said that the Zen 3 architecture would be using 7nm for, at the very least, the data center. So it would be extremely odd that we would see 5nm for Ryzen and then 7nm for data center. That would be an extremely odd decision. So either way, it seems like we will have Ryzen 4000 launched by the end of the year. They did not provide an exact release date, which kind of means I suspect a lot of folks are just going to skip over the Ryzen 3000 XT product lines, given the fairly modest clock speed bump that we see with them. It still will be very interesting to me, though, in regards to how they will fight off Intel, because once again, Intel seems to be backporting, or at least as close as they can backport, the Tiger Lake architecture. And while the IPC doesn't seem to be quite as good as what we would see with actual genuine Willow Cove, even so, I think given Intel's clock frequency for gaming, yeah, I think AMD will definitely have a fight on its hands. Either way, I'm very happy that Ryzen 4000 is going to release this year. It's definitely good for us as customers. Anyway, back to Paul of the current rather than Paul of the future.
And now, quickly moving from AMD, let's discuss Nvidia and some mysteries concerning the GTX 16 series of cards. Wait, what? 16 series of cards? What could possibly be? Though, Nvidia aren't going to do it. They're not going to release more of them, are they? You guessed it. This one's really quite an odd rumor, and it was originally spotted by Momomo and also points to Ada64, which have actually detailed more SKUs. With this new changelog version 6.25.5434 beta, we now have support for Nvidia GeForce GTX 1650 TU106 and Nvidia GeForce GTX 1650 with TU116. Now, these specifications are missing, so we don't know, for example, how much RAM is on the system, how many CUDA cores are enabled, and so on and so on. But most likely, this would need to feature GDDR6 memory. Allegedly, there is a worldwide shortage at the moment of GDDR5 memory, and the same is not true for the GDDR6 memory. It's quite bountiful at the moment. So there are some questions. Assuming this is true, which if it's in Ada, it likely is, and also Rogaine has spotted some identifiers online as well, and he's pretty good at finding this stuff. Does it mean that the GeForce GTX 16 series will have hardware-based ray tracing? Because obviously they are essentially using the cores, for example, of the 2060. Well, I'm going to imagine that it would be disabled. Now, the question is it disabled purely via BIOS, or would there be, like, cut in the die or something, which is basically impossible to enable the cores? If it's not, and you can enable them, that would be amazing. That would essentially give you a cheap entry into an RTX 2060. Now, the rumors are for the next generation cards, AMD will be facing Nvidia's full arsenal featuring ray tracing. This is allegedly the rumor anyway. So the very lowest end RTX 30 series cards will allegedly have hardware-based ray tracing, and honestly, from my perspective, that makes sense, especially for DLSS, which is ultimately, to me, the big thing for the lower end cards, being able to upsample. And obviously, Nvidia have made some really big strides for for DLSS. And I suspect they're going to continue to do that. You can actually see what they've been doing with the Ampere architecture with the tensor cores, and you can presume that that speed up is going to be of paramount importance for DLSS 3, assuming it shifts to version 3. Those are the rumors from Moore's Law is dead anyway, that DLSS 3 is coming. But whether his information is accurate or inaccurate, I do suspect that the next generation cards are going to be pretty damn spectacular for ray tracing performance. I'm actually hearing that Ampere could have 2 or 3 times the performance in hardware-based ray tracing. Several people have told me that. In fact, some people have told me even higher, but the median seems to be around 3 times faster. Now, obviously, at the end of the day, these are all whispers in the wind, and until I actually get the bloody card in my hand and test it out, I'm not going to believe anything 100%. But what I will say is that I'm going to be very interested to see what Nvidia do in the bottom end of the market, up to around the $300, $400, $500 mark, especially given what we're seeing for the next generation consoles. I'd also like to thank around 1 million of you actually for tagging me, DMing me, emailing me regarding an announcement from Rad Game Tools. And this is actually very interesting as it concerns compression and the PlayStation 5. As I'm sure basically everyone is aware at this point, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X will utilize SSDs, but still there are concessions to be made. If you don't compress data, well, A, you're still reducing the throughput to the memory, and B, you're making the data larger on the SSD. I'm actually doing a video at the moment where I more extensively delve into the SSDs of both consoles, so you can check that out pretty soon. It should be up in the next few days. I'm in the process of editing it. Well, actually, pretty much after I'm done with this. But long story short, compression is going to, of course, be a very important factor for both systems. Both Sony and Microsoft are doing their damnedest to improve data throughput and make sure that only the data that is needed is going to be resident. For example, on the Microsoft side of the equation, we've got sampler feedback, which allows the developer and game engine to have a better understanding of what part of a texture is actually being displayed. Because let's say you have a really big 4K texture and you're displaying the entire thing, that's all, sorry, if it's only displaying a part of that, then all of that is in data. If you don't know that you can, say, for example, only load half of the texture. So with this particular technology, you can basically load segments of the texture as like 128K blocks. So what exactly does any of this have to do with this particular announcement from Rad Game Tools? They have introduced Oodle Texture, which is a new compression product in the family of Oodle Texture and Preconditioner, and it's for BC1 to BC7 texture compression formats. This is, by the way, known as super compression. Oh, by the way, the link, of course, their announcement in the video description. According to their information, Oodle Texture can actually reduce the size of GPU textures by up to half, either Oodle Kraken or zlib. Now, this format, or sorry, this tool is available for different platforms. It's for the PlayStation 4 and PS5, Xbox, Switch, Windows, Mac, and Linux. But the reason I'm discussing this in more of a Sony perspective is because Sony have actually obtained a license for Oodle Texture for all developers who are creating things for either the PlayStation 5 or the PlayStation 4. And furthermore, on the PS4 or 5, you can use Oodle Texture to convert Sony's GCN format, and apparently it also works very well with PS5's built-in hardware Kraken decoder. If you actually mosey to their website, you can see much more information about this. This is mostly a news video, so I will only want to go over it kind of briefly.
but there are some comparisons that the company have put in where you can basically kind of hover over it and then click the mouse button to show what the differences are in quality depending on the compression ratio. And honestly, even at 40% size reduction, there is basically no visible difference. There's also a couple of graphs actually the company have created where you can peruse once again if you so desire, and they show the difference in compression ratio between near lossless BC7 Prep and BC7.
Undoubtedly, people are going to start making comparisons against Microsoft's BC Pack, and I will start to investigate that a little bit more, as frankly, I don't want to just put some information out there. I'd rather do a lot more research on BC Pack and also these specific tools. I'll try to reach out to the company themselves and see if I can get a couple of comments regarding the performance. But ultimately, this is going to be really cool for next generation. BC Pack actually from Microsoft is a really nice bonus for the Xbox. So it's going to be very interesting how all of this plays out. It's still so early, to be honest, as well for games developers. Ultimately, and I know I've said this like a trillion times in videos, but ultimately, performance is important, but actually using that performance smartly is also important. You can saturate any bus, you can fully utilize any CPU or GPU. It doesn't matter how powerful it is. So being smart about that so that you don't end up with a die that's like, you know, the size of a Ford pickup truck and also consumes the equivalent energy of like 2 nuclear-powered submarines is important. Ultimately, it's not just about having a high performance architecture, but also efficiencies in that architecture, as well as the software surrounding it, which are going to be of paramount importance. When it comes to tools like this, it's not something that you as a average person are going to need to worry about. It's of course down to the developers. So even the PlayStation 3, it was a nightmare to develop for, but ultimately the only negative for you is that it meant that certain ports for the PS3 just didn't live up to the expectations because they were not fully utilizing, for example, the cell processor in the PlayStation 3. I'm hearing really good things about both consoles and the development, but I'll go more extensively into this in another video. And finally, Microsoft are preparing a series of mic drops. At least this is the rumor for the upcoming July event. And this allegedly is not necessarily in response to just Sony and the PlayStation 5, but apparently Microsoft wants to send a message to the entire industry. All of this information comes courtesy of Eastman, who is apparently pretty damn good with their track record, and they were speaking on Beyond 3D forums. Now, according to their information, they believe that Lockhart will be priced at half the cost of the Xbox Series X. Now, I've actually got another video going up today, which is detailing what I think the pricing of these specific consoles will be. These are a series of guesses. But long story short, Eastman believes that Microsoft will want to undercut Sony, but whatever the Series X ends up costing, they will halve that price for Lockhart. And apparently Lockhart itself is titchy. Microsoft will make up any losses they take at higher cut of game sales and more subscriptions. Prices also depend on what Sony does. Microsoft doesn't have to go extreme in its pricing if Sony prices itself higher. But from what I've heard about the event, he continues, this July event isn't just about Sony. July is about the industry, and they want a night of mic drops. They're going to take hard to the stage with a strategy they've been building for years, and they want to take on Google, Amazon, Apple, Sony, and yes, Nintendo to shake them up. So expect a series of mic drops moments followed by the price, which will be a key part of all of this. That's why I think Lockhart is a key device in their strategy. It's low-cost gateway they can control to make sure the hardware can handle their new compression techniques, which they will employ with Lockhart over the next few years. The plan for Lockhart is to get into price categories they're never able to hit before, and I believe based on listening between the lines, they expect Lockhart to at some point make it down to Fire TV size. Also, the size of the first Lockhart will surprise everyone. End quote. I'm going to be very interested to see all of this is true. Mic drop moments are, well, let's face it, something that we always hear of is going to happen in the industry, and yet we've been waiting for Microsoft's real mic drop moment for a long time now. I think, to my understanding anyway, the company do have a lot of games in the works, and I know there's a meme about Microsoft not having games, but I really do believe that it's going to change. I know Sony are definitely working on some really big properties, and from what I'm hearing, Microsoft have a lot of stuff in the works. I've actually been told a couple of the games, but I don't want to mention what they are because I've been sworn to secrecy. But believe me when I say that if the rumors are true, and I'm obviously not 100% certain, I think Microsoft over the next year or two are going to have some incredible titles. The question for me is it going to be enough to convince, say, PC gamers to switch? Well, that's kind of the thing. I'm mostly a PC gamer, to be honest, so it kind of benefits me regardless, no matter what happens. But from the perspective of console-only gaming, there's also quite a few questions. Like, if, for example, you can stream everything from xCloud, that's going to be a tempting prospect if the streaming service is decent with xCloud. And, well, yeah, we've kind of known how, say, Google have done with their specific services in Stadia. Yeah, I actually tried Stadia at GDC last year, and I tested it, and I was not impressed even at the time. And I consistently got told that it's going to be better at launch. I promise. And yeah, it didn't end up happening. The latency was tangible. In fact, I actually was testing Stadia at GDC by pressing like a button with Assassin's Creed so you could see the lag, but I only managed to record that for a few seconds and I was actually stopped by a member of staff because they really didn't like me doing that. And I actually uploaded that on a video back in the day. I can't remember when it was, but it was around the time of GDC. So latency, of course, is the big thing. So obviously compression here is once again the factor which is going to be for the next generation. So yeah, it's going to be very curious how all of this plays out. But as always, thank you very much for watching the video. Let me know what you would like from Microsoft for their mic drop moment. What games and pricing would you expect? And speaking of pricing, there'll also be another video, probably going up today as well, which is focused on the pricing of the consoles. So go ahead and check that out. With all of that said though, thank you very much for watching the video. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.